What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. Thanks for checking out this episode. Keep Climbing. Back here today with Mr. Brian French himself, talking about an awesome topic today. Totally his idea. I'm super immersed in it. I think it's a great topic as well, too. The topic is, do you want to tell them? What's the topic?
No, go ahead.
The topic is technology in today's game. And that's the big picture topic. I want to peel it all the way back and talk about what it was like, where it is now, you know, some of the subjective and objective differences. And I think the biggest point I want to hammer home at the end is like, how does it actually make a difference and help players? There's so much technology, so many things, so many concepts. One of the first things that stands out in my mind when I think about this topic is how, lost, I guess, I was before, like searching the internet. I guess it would have been that like 2008-ish like time frame like we were talking about earlier of, looking for information, which sounds so funny. Like looking for information that I couldn't find. Go on Google and type in like baseball pitchers workout. Like I remember like doing that and like, I'd committed to Mizzou already at the time, so I'm like texting my coaches like, hey, please like send me something. I want to like get to work, but I don't know what to do. That's so funny to think about that now because you go on Google now and you've got 1,000 hits and you're sifting through what's actually good, So just the information in general is night and day different. Quantity.
It hadn't been that long ago. We were doing a winter workout tour stop with the gamers, and I think it was I think it was pre-COVID. We were doing it that winter before everything just shut down. I think it was, and Coach Beckman was still over there.
Yep.
I remember we would go over. We're filming, and they've got this contraption for the hitters, and it was from a golf company.
Yeah, K-Vest.
Yes.
Yep.
And they were still trying to make everything work well for a baseball hitter, but it was still that, you could kind of see how it conformed to a golf swing. Yeah. So I thought that was it, and that hadn't been that long ago.
No, it's come so far. And I mean, just the same way, like with our phones, like this is a fairly new phone, and we all know in 5 years it'll be a brick and totally obsolete. Unfortunately, it's the exact same
I'm still
way.
on the 12, man.
Yeah, I mean, it just is, right? Like you like, or you laugh about it because you know, like, yeah, I mean, and I'll ride this sucker out till it dies, But I mean, everything is just advancing so quick across the world. Baseball is no different. Technology, as it improves, like teaches us a lot of things, and I think probably one of the biggest like misconceptions or distortions of what technology is and what it does for us now is that it's meant to replace maybe what we were doing before, and kind of talking about basically what technology and some of these measurements like K-Vest and that's a markered motion capture system is what it is, and we've got a markerless motion capture system now that uses AI and is a little bit more new, I mean, I don't know how else to say that, but a little bit more updated.
It's just an update.
That it's, measuring and quantifying the same types of measurements, rotational angles and speeds at which your joints like rotate, right? Whether it's a hitter or a pitcher. And, some of those things that we have now help us like objectify some of the training. So you can get a pre-number and a post-number, and how we go about, making sense of that. And the middle is obviously where the money's made. I'll talk a little bit more about that like later, but as far as like how far this has come, how fast it's coming, it's constantly evolving. And I think that's why you see so many people, I think early on it was maybe thought to be a fad, or people didn't understand it, technology driven, like we didn't understand it yet. And I think now you're really starting to see everybody be like, okay, like this is real, not going anywhere. I need to dive into this. I need to learn this. I need to hire a consultant to help me learn this. We have a portion of our business for Premier that, that's what we go and do for colleges and help them build their labs, capture their data, understand their data, et cetera. And, the fact that all those things exist shows you how big of a role like technology is playing in our lives and in our game. But it doesn't really take away from the subjectivity in the coach's eye. It's meant to accentuate that. You know,
Yeah.
it doesn't change. I think it does help us like really identify core foundational truths about training and like core pillars.
Yeah.
You know, but it
I would
doesn't
agree.
change that like I've got to be balanced. I've got to have good direction, and have to have a good finish as a pitcher. And, you know, when I was teaching pitching lessons,
Pronation,
when I was 20 years old, you know, young professional kid, like none of that's really changed, and it hasn't changed. But I think what it's helped us do is truly figure out with an objective view what's important, you know.
The fun thing for me, and I love this because it when you hit me with this stuff, all these conversations, because I'm talking with Sissel all the time, Kevin Mulder, we're talking with Mitch Thomas, and we get all these guys coming in, and it's great conversation. And one of the things that I think, as you said right there, are we seeing a baseline in the analytics that is kind of separating where kids are being recruited? Is that part of this? You know where that's at. You know, what does a D1 player look like? Is there a delineation and a line that says you got to kind of meet some of this criteria? As you said, it's not doesn't define you, but at the moment, this is what we're looking for in the athlete to be able to compete at this level.
Yeah. You know, I think that's probably one of the biggest impacts it's had on our game. I think when I was growing up watching baseball, I think one of the things that I fell in love with baseball for the most was the fact that David Eckstein could win a World Series MVP. You know, baseball players came in all shapes
Tommy
and
Edman.
Yeah, amen. And there's still so many cases like that because at the end of the day, like, you know, people are looking for winners in production, and like if you can do that consistently enough for long enough, like you'll get a chance, you know.
Right.
But a little bit about like what it was like before, you know, from a training standpoint
Sorry, I
and
went
an evaluation standpoint. No,
my brain goes.
I think they're one and the same because the conversation on both of those things is the impact that technology's had on our game.
Right,
You know?
right.
So previously you've got you know, this production driven, execution driven. You know, you can be 5'6" and 150 pounds, and you put the bat on the ball and like play good defense and, you know, whatever, you know, like all those tools. I think as we've got more technology and we've got better ways to measure those tools, and we've got a better way to measure, you know, what a Division I pitcher's analytics needs to look like outside of velocity, you know, because even when I was getting recruited 15 years ago, every single coach still brought a radar gun, you know, so and you know, the expectations even in that category have risen, you know, like when I remember like hitting 90 was like some big feat, and now like every, you know,
If you're not,
I mean, yeah, you were certainly going Division I and you had a chance to get drafted.
Yeah.
Now it's like we got guys that aren't even making it to Division I school that are throwing 90, you know, so totally different ball game there. But as we've started to identify, that's what technology's helped us do, truly. As we've started to identify what produces success for baseball players, the bigger percentage of the time, I think that's the hardest thing for people to wrap their heads around baseball is that the fact that failure is so prominent, that we're not just looking 100%. You can take a guy who doesn't throw hard, he can go out and have a great season, he can have a great career, he can have a great whatever his analytics is. It doesn't have to be velocity, you know. That's the one that gets thrown out, the most popular. But you can take any type of like analytical outlier and absolutely he can have success. Baseball evaluators and recruiters, though, these days, kind of to go back to your point, what you started to bring up, are starting to use those as entry gates to certain levels to say like, well, shoot, like here's what the average pitcher in our league looked like last year. Right. And now I know what that is, and I can actually objectify it, not just that the average velocity was 88.7, because we all know that comes in so many different shapes and sizes. Is he right-handed? Is he left-handed? Is he high slot? Is he low slot? Is he submarine? Like, I mean, that's 5 different variables right there, let alone what type of other pitches he has. Does he throw sinkers? Does he throw four seams? Does he have a really good breaking ball? Does he have a really good changeup? There's so many factors that go into all that. But now every single factor that I just said, because of technology, has a measurable to show what the average is in each one of those leagues.
Now let me ask you this. Brett sitting here today, going through and doing all that, Brett at junior and high school, was that even a thought process?
Oh no, I was just throwing that thing as hard as I could.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, no, and I mean truly on an individual scale there now too. Talk about like how it's impacted training, how it's impacted kids of that age. Like going through that process that, that I went through, that we went through, is much more aware of the analytics, much more maybe overcritical.
Maybe hyper.
Yes.
Aware?
Yes. Hyper aware, overcritical of their things because they understand it enough to be dangerous, where they understand maybe what is good, but they don't get how the full picture like fits together. Because there's so many things, man. We could talk for hours. Like one of the hot topics is velocity. You talk about spin rate, and then you talk about vertical brake and induced vertical brake. And those are, you talk to somebody who knows, scratch the surface on TrackMan, they'll tell you those are probably like three pretty big things to look at in there. Now, while that's certainly true, we could break all of those down in a whole separate podcast for me to prove to you that is not the only thing you can look at.
We'll have to do that. Let me ask you this, because we were talking about this before we started this the show, and we were talking about feel, and you not having technology. The kids today, and you look at the differences, what we're talking about. Here, technology, you had a little bit of it and whatnot. Did the kids, is it better or is it worse? Is it a non-thing? Does a kid maybe rely too much on this than rather learning how to feel his body?
I think it's probably too generalized to say on a big picture case. I think it's definitely very individualized there. It depends on the person, depends on the circumstance, depends on the coach, depends on how much you're driving home to them. You could have a very analytical coach with a very non-analytical player and still find a way to be successful, and vice versa. But I will say, I think the proof is how much the average velocity and output metrics have gone up for players that are 16 years old or whatever benchmark age you want to talk about, 22 years old, or the average velocity in the major leagues keeps going up. So I think that is your proof right there that it's better for them in general. And I think the people that it helps the most truly are the people in the middle, right? Because you've got your rule of thirds. You've got your people that are in the top third that like they're going to show up and they're going to roll out of bed and they're just going to be better than me. Okay. That's
Bummer.
Just the way God made them. You know what I mean? They throw
Genetics.
hard and okay. You got your bottom third
Right.
that aren't going to make it to the next level. And that's just the reality of it. Then you've got this middle third of people who have the talent, they're borderline, they've got the dedication. Maybe they've got some talent and they're like superstar on the discipline dedication side, maybe vice versa. That people in the middle, because of information like this, if taken and implemented well, push themselves to that top third category. And that's what's happened. I don't think that there's more people, that are just that much more talented than there were 30 years ago. It's people who have taken strategies and implemented them and made themselves better from a development standpoint.
And not to mention, at 20, they grew 3 inches.
Yeah.
Which happens, right?
Yeah.
And they put on, all of a sudden, the body finishes, and you're like, oh my gosh.
That's snowball mentality, too. I mean, I tell these kids at these facilities, too, that I get to know is that, like, man, if I had this when I was 15 years old, just think about how much faster or how much bigger the snowball gets the quicker we push it down the hill.
Right.
And that's just the analogy, like, you've got to think about this on, is that, people ask me all the time, does my 14-year-old need a motion capture? I don't know. You tell me. How much faster you want to get better? You know what I mean? Is learning about a pitching delivery sooner, or learning truly what you need to work on sooner, ever a bad thing? No. Like, can you get by without it for this year? Probably. Like, I'm really not in the population of people that want to get by, though. You know what I mean? I want to be the best I can be, and I get there's all kinds of costs in family and other sports and things that go into it. I'm not trying to suggest one way is how everybody has to do it, but that's my common rebuttal to that conversation. It's like, well, yeah, for the most part, I know that kid from our conversation last week, that height and mass is what's going to impact that person's ceiling the most. Okay. But you start to talk about like some of those data things and the implementation of it. I mean, if you have to ask me that question, you don't understand compound interest. You don't.
Right. Exactly. And one of the things that I think is interesting is, you were in an era, and it ain't that far. I shouldn't even say era. That's
Making
weird.
me sound old, man.
Now, I know, right? You were in a not too long ago where we didn't have as much technology, and this is something that's born out of conversations I have with kids. I first started doing it at a PBR event, talking to high level athletes, asking them, how long did it take you to understand how these metrics, how this information helped you train?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking about guys that are D1 athletes saying, oh man, a year, some 2. Yeah. I'm just like,
that's to argue that they probably don't know what they're talking about.
and it's, what? I'm
they're
not so
starting
sure.
to. Yeah. They not to be disrespectful to them. I'm sure they put a lot of their time and effort into
but
learning.
They all laugh. They're like, man. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Well, I lived it too, They'll look back 5 years from now. I'm like, man, I didn't know nothing when I was like that, And then they'll do 5 more years. But we should be. You're growing or dying like you should be looking back and saying that.
And I think let me ask you this too. As a 17-year-old, do they really understand the application part of it as well as they should? Because when we're going to events and we're talking to kids and whatnot, do you really know and the application? You look back at just trying to apply the things that people were teaching you, and I think that's a hard thing for kids.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, and I think that topic specifically is generally, this is a oversimplification, but there's generally 2 different types of coaches. Somebody who wants to like really try and learn the latest, greatest, best way to teach and coach and implement things. And then you got another population of people that says, well, here's how I did it, do it like that, Now, I don't think either one of those are wrong. And I also don't think either one of those is right. Because I do think you should really try to pull on experiences to best verbalize to your athletes and teach them like the road that they have ahead of them. But I also think, on the other hand, you've got to constantly be trying to learn, like have this mentality to never stop learning, And so like those 2 things have to be present at the same time. But maybe say your question there again, because that was the first thing that kind of came to my mind.
Well, now you got me going here, because what you said there was quite interesting. Because let me put this to you, because we're talking about technology and the application, right? And you said you have 2 different types of coaches, which I agree. I think that's true. But let me ask you this: you coach, you instruct, you're doing this. Now you got other guys that do the same, and you're talking to all different types of people and how you're presenting information. But you, pitching at a high level, there are certain, how would I say this? Because watching my son pitch, watching hitting and whatnot, and I always like the application of hitting because I think it's interesting to me.
It's hard.
It is. It's very hard, and especially when guys are throwing at your face.
Yeah.
But there are certain things within pitching that cannot be different. They are the foundational pieces, right?
Sure.
Core pillars. Your foot down or rotational hips. I don't know. I'm just spitballing stuff. Same thing with hitting. Your hands, the things, the balance. There are certain core pillars to everything. I always believe the best coaches, and I want your opinion on this. I don't care how you get there, as long as you get there.
In your delivery.
Right?
Yeah. I think that's probably one of the biggest things that stands out from having a tool like a motion capture system or any type of system like that. And people have been around baseball long enough, like from a subjective point of view, like they already they know and understand that too. You know, they don't need a motion capture thing to tell them that these guys can produce at a high level. Because at the end of the day, we always take any of these things and we backtrack off of them. You know, do you throw hard? Right. You know, do you generate enough force to like have quality pitches? Mm-hmm. Do you throw strikes, and do you stay healthy? Because if you do all three of those things, you're in the Hall of Fame. Like, it's not changing. It's never changed. Okay. We backtrack off of that, right? So like, if that's your identifier, then you can take that example I just gave you right there. How many different body types, ways to go about things, deliveries, arm angles, arm actions, you know, pelvis, rotational things, elements, you know,
right.
ground interaction elements, right. of all the pitchers that are in the Hall of Fame. And every single one of them is totally different, from Randy Johnson to Pedro to, you know, bigger pitchers, the smaller framed, you know, like whatever. So, but one of the biggest things I think it's taught us is, you know, like, what are the fundamental key points in pitching, you know, and your delivery, at least, you know, and what impacts that, I think, is probably the next thing that you start to ask. Because, you know, one of the points here that I had is, you know, talking more about how does all this data and how does all this technology, how does it actually help players, mm-hmm. you know, because there's two very different sides for that, you know, you can go to a scouting or recruiting event and you can get your data collected. Sure. And that's obviously meant to evaluate you. Mm-hmm. You know, no coaches are looking at my motion capture report on you when you come in and do your assessment. Like, it's solely meant to be used to help you get better. And even then, there's so many different things that you could do to implement strategies there to like make a difference for athletes. And I would say that that's probably one of the most misunderstood things. And I think a lot of people advertise that they have data and they do, you know, individualized training, you know, player development. Sure. Those are all like very big buzzy words these days. Sure. Because of technology. And everybody's like adopted that and understood that, like, that's what people are looking for. That's the newest, latest thing.
You just say development.
Yeah,
right?
And it's like, holy cow, what do you even mean by that, right? But using that from a evaluation standpoint, you know, or an individualization standpoint, and then really how you go about doing that, because you could break that down even further. And if I explain it like this, maybe it makes a little bit more sense. But you have like assessment's also a very big buzzword in this field these days, right? Like, you take your assessment. Is that like a baseline assessment? Am I going to take this test, right? And then I'm going to do the same training program, or do a training program, whether mine has slight tweaks than yours does or whatever, but we're going to do a training program, and then we're going to do another baseline test at the end, see where you start. It's a pre-test and a post-test. That's how most people think of assessments and data and technology, like that, okay? That is not how we do it at P3. Not at all. And I think that's probably one of the most misunderstood. Now, is it used like that to see growth? Absolutely. But if that's all you're doing to see growth, you don't really understand how all those things impact each other. Okay? The output things that I told you there, from a stuff, strikes, and health standpoint, it always starts there. But then you backtrack off of that, and we look at, you know, what type of production their pitches are you know, producing, what type of outcome their pitches are producing, how they move on the mound, in space, how their body moves statically, passively, you know, and then how they move in the weight room, you know, and all of those things are so very intertwined that you know, it's not really meant to be just like a baseline test. It's meant to like have like assessment based, individualized training programs that are obviously under this umbrella of like training age and biological age. Like, we're not going to give these super complex like training strategies to a younger kid that hasn't like checked the initial like boxes first. And then we've you know, through our process have, you know, developed that and you know, tried to figure out when to dose those things out like appropriately, but very misunderstood about how data and technology and assessments like actually should be able to help you. Like, you can go take an assessment and you know, you just are what you are, you know, but how does it make an impact for you and a player, I think, is probably, people can't quite wrap their head around that sometimes.
Curious, look at what you're saying here and, the use of what you're talking about in these specific deals. So you go back just, we're talking about 2010, right? That's 16 years. No, I'm sorry. I don't math well. 24 years.
14. Wait a minute.
No, it's
2024
2024.
to
It's
2010?
24 years. 2010, right? No, 14.
14.
Yeah, I know. I told you, man. I can talk about everything else. Don't give me math. I don't even know why I said 26. Boy, that's bad. Anywho, you go back and you look at this. 14 years is not long ago.
Yeah.
Honestly, you think about it, 14 years is not long ago. Okay, you look at this thought process and you say, when you're here in 2010, how were those things assessed?
Oh, they weren't. I mean, they were assessed with a radar gun when I was going through it, and that's like about it.
That was it.
And just how you produced on the field. And I think that's what I was kind of pointing towards in my first category, or their point there of like, what was it like before? Well, before, for training, we played long toss, got as strong as we could, and didn't really lift.
How much was the weight room?
I worked out with my football guys,
Right.
but like, in college, it definitely was much more serious, by the time I got to college, we were all like on a pretty consistent lifting program, but like, things like Premier didn't even exist then, like we went and did pitching lessons still. And even if you did that, like it was extra, it seemed, so, the other side of that was like, if you just produced on the field, and we started, the radar gun was definitely like in play there. But that was the only like measurements that went into it. It was like, how fast did you run down the first base? It was like, there wasn't any type of like measurements like that. It was all very subjective and like a coach's opinion on like, oh, I like the way he moves, or he looks like he is a ball player, or, he's works hard and is tough at practice, and, things like that, so.
It hadn't, and too, even 25, I remember the first time I saw this type of setting, we were Zumwalt East. Justin was a junior, I think, that year. It was Matt Veerling's senior year, and he was on the mound. And we show up, and I mean, it was just a sea of guns.
Yeah, no doubt.
And that's basically all they had, right?
Yeah, that was it. I mean, about that time is when training like this and technology maybe like this started to get popular, but like totally night and day different from what it is now, and where it'll even be in 5 or 10 more years. But that overall like process, I guess, is just constantly changing and evolving. And basically, once you kind of get up to speed and adopt like the newest thing, it seems like it's irrelevant. Not irrelevant, but like not the latest and greatest thing. Like you got to continually stacking like this mentality to keep up with it because it's growing so fast.
Now, curious, does the technology train, does it stop somewhere?
I think we'll constantly be, it's just the way our world is right now. I think we'll constantly be developing new technology capabilities. I think things will get simpler. I think they'll help us identify maybe better core pillars for training, for our pitching delivery, for our weight room strategies and nutrition, recovery strategies, etc. I don't think that that's like going away, but I think there has to be some type of like cutoff block for everybody on analytics that, I guess what I mean by that is, that like you can't just build a pitcher in a lab, like there has to be real life experiences, strategies like in place, experiences that help you figure out how to use those tools that you build, in the building. I tell players all the time, like my goal for you isn't to have your best like bullpen on my mound here. Like that's great for my business. I can take a video of it and put it on social media, and everybody be like, hey, look at me. Like we helped Johnny, take his velocity up 8 miles an hour. But like if you don't go out and actually do that and produce on the field, then it like means absolutely nothing to us. Like we want you to win. We want you to accomplish your goals, And, I think I think there is a pretty big disconnect between, you know, and I can appreciate it. You know, I could appreciate it. Like, you're working hard. We're just not looking to build robots. We're looking to build ball players. You know, and I think that's maybe something that gets lost in that translation.
I agree. I like that thought process because I think it's easy to do that when you start talking about players and things of that nature. You start going, you know, do this, and it becomes very mechanical.
Yeah, absolutely.
Instead of just going
not
out,
feel based. And maybe go
Right.
back to our point that we brought up earlier. Like, there
There you
has
go.
to be this balance of feel, physical feel, mental feel. You know, when I say feel around baseball, guys, they know what I'm talking about, right? But just like a mental awareness of how to walk and talk and think and act like a baseball player, you know, and whether that's between the lines or outside of the lines, you know, yeah, we're, you know, that's basically what I mean by, like, not trying to build robots, is that you have to have some type of feel element, and you know, maybe to tie this all back to the beginning of this conversation of, like, well, what was it like before? It's like, it was entirely feel. It was entirely subjective.
I agree.
You know, and we got to be careful that we're not pushing it so polarizing to the other side, that it's so objective and so monotonous, and so, like, you know, that we're missing the sweet spots, like somewhere in the middle there, you know. and seriously, I love that this is where this conversation has gotten to, because at Premier Pitching Performance, I think our number one thing that we say to people or coaches, and when we're trying to describe our business or ourselves, is that, like, we're a business that wants to own the middle. Okay, and what I mean by that is that, like, we're baseball guys. We grew up like this. Like, that's how I learned how to throw hard. I didn't do none of this stuff, you know.
Right.
But we've taken the knowledge and the experience and the tools and the other people around us and whatever have you, to blend the two the best that we can, to help make a difference on a real level, impactful level, for every athlete that comes through the doors, you know. And like, that to me is probably, like, our core, like, business mantra, is, like, own the middle, because we know, you know, people have said this to me for the last couple of years, like the guy who can go into the clubhouse in the major league setting and actually talk to a player, like we're doing right now, where, like, you're actually picking up what I'm putting down, but also I can turn around and go talk to the data analysts and be smart enough to talk about, you know, degrees of rotation and, you know, angular velocities and all these different things that this stuff will tell you.
Right.
That's a unicorn. And that guy is in the major leagues as a coach, and he'll be there for as long as he freaking wants to be, because there aren't unicorns just walking around the street every day, you know?
Right.
So that guy, the reason is because he's in the middle, is because he gets it, you know, like, he gets the game. He gets what the players go through. He gets what's expected of them, but he also gets this side of it that can be very impactful if implemented correctly. And in that process, when you start to learn how to, like, what questions to ask, you start getting answers that you may never even thought to ask the question to. And ultimately, that's the definition of our assessment process. And what I mean by how those things are all intertwined, how we try to make a difference for athletes, is that, like, it's not just a baseline test.
Right.
You know, a baseline, sure, it can act as a baseline test. We're going to take a pre, we're going to take a post, we're going to see how you did in between that. But after you do your pre, there's this whole, like, process afterwards. I'd love to show you someday. We've got an assessment.
We got to go to P3 and do the show from
Yeah,
there.
no doubt. We've got an assessment flow chart, basically, that is all of these different things. Like, if this analytic is impacted, look at these three things, or, you know, whatever have you. Like, this huge web of how these things all work together, you know, because they do. And you know, the way that you move on the mound may not have nothing to do with your mechanics. It may have way more to do with your mobility or strength capabilities.
Right.
You know, and, like, how we get to the production of, like, what the ball's actually doing coming out of your hands starts way before that. It may have started when you were born, you know, like, and that just may be nothing we can do about that.
To your point, Justin, much later, he was working for, he got his training certificate, all that stuff, whatever it is, nutrition, you know, certified trainer and all that. Mm-hmm. He says, Dad, I figured out, he said, they were talking about these things. I didn't know what he was talking about either. But a particular way your pelvis moves, it dictates how well you rotate, and I guess some of these things.
Yeah.
And he said, so you have to kind of restructure how you do things. He said, if I'd have known this when I was pitching, he said it would have changed a lot for me in that respect because I was working against my body.
Yeah, no doubt. Most of the people find, not most of, but like when people find things to be true like that, like most of the time they find that they've actually been fighting against themselves for a long time.
That was wild to me, man.
That's where I think things can be so misleading because people feel like I'm going to go work hard, and they do things, they do activities, and it doesn't necessarily help them get better. And if you actually could compare it and you like kind of zoom out and gain some wisdom like that, you start to learn like actually it might have been very counterproductive for me to be doing things like XYZ, you know, like I have my own experiences like that like if learned, you know, some of these things earlier about how how the body works in general, but very, you know, very much so, like more specifically than that, how my body works specifically. You know, the way I learned pitching was by like watching people who are really good at pitching and like trying to do it
And
like
replicating it,
yeah,
right?
you know?
Yes.
And I'd go talk to my coaches, and I had some people that were impactful for me, no doubt, and like helped me with different things, different drills, different theories, etc. But like I watched somebody do it and I said, okay, I'm going to try to do it like that, you know? And that's so like flawed when I think about it now. My delivery changed 10 different times from the time I was a senior in high school to the time I actually got done, because I was just trying new things, because I didn't know how my body needed to move best to make Brett the best he could be.
Right.
So when you take an objective approach and you're actually just trying to learn, you're just trying to learn what it is about my body that is good, bad, or indifferent, you know, and how it's put together, how it moves in space, what type of performance, like, you know, strengths or limitations do I have? You know, it helps you really like identify exactly what I need to be working on. You eliminate all the guesswork completely.
Right.
You eliminate all of it. You're not sitting there guessing like, oh, I'm going to do this, and then you're 3 years down the road and you find out something like that. It's like, man, it's crushing for some people to go through that. Like I thank God that I was able to play for as long as I could trying to do that, you know, like God 100% like gave me the tools and the talents, and I was good at the right times to achieve those things, you know, like I've thought about that a 1,000 different ways, but like, you know, how impactful 3 months leading up to a draft, your college junior season, if that's just like marginally different, my entire rest of my life could have been totally different. Like, you know, how, and then even then for like recruiting, back it up to like that recruiting window, like entirely different. So it's just like the margin for error is just so fine that if you could eliminate some of that as early as you can, I'll go back to my, you know, well, does a 14 or 15-year-old need this? If you could eliminate some of that guesswork earlier rather than later, why in the world would you not, you know?
And I think it you know, you were talking, you used the terminology subjective, objective, and do, you know, young kids at 14, 15 really understand those thought processes? Because I always look, you know, you said in the middle, you know, I always look at balance. How do you understand something and put yourself in that place to where, what's the objective? You know, well, I want to throw like that guy. Yeah, and you've watched. I think it's interesting because you do. You know, you picked out a guy and you're trying to replicate him, but your body doesn't move like that pitcher. I always find it fascinating, especially within baseball, more than probably any of the sports. A hitter. How many hitters do you see in the batter's box with the same stance? Pitchers starting differently. I mean, I don't know how many times I heard the John Smoltz say about that one relief pitcher for the Padres who short-armed from here. He says, that is not the way you would teach that. And Smoltz said it, I don't know how many times, that's not the way you would teach that. Every time the guy came out, that's not the way you would teach that. But it works for him. Yeah,
right. Well, think about how many people have gotten coached out of those things and never made it because they were coached out of their best movement patterns. I'm going to throw this out there. Unpopular opinion Tuesday here.
Oh, boy,
or maybe Monday, because this goes live on a Monday, right? Yeah. Unpopular opinion. I bet you there might be more people that have done that and not made it than people who have did it and made it.
I'm not so. I would agree with that.
I bet it's closer than you would like to hope it would be.
Right.
And it's all like I don't think you can fault a whole lot of people because I think most of that.
I agree.
Most of that scenario is meant from a good place of coaches trying to help players and players genuinely trying to get better. But that's why you have to identify what actually makes players better. And what not just like what makes players in general get better, but like what helps individual players get better, and learning yourself and what you need, how your body's put together, where you fall out on any and all of these spectrums, if you will, before you just start going gung-ho at things, everything you do might not make you better.
That's right. And I go back to this, and I've seen, as you said, with coaches, and I would say this to a lot of youth coaches, don't worry so much about how the kid gets there. Think about the result. Think about, and it's hard because we don't see these things. You get a chance to break things down and see a kid in a very, minute fashion. Yeah. Right. And you can pick those things apart. And I think that's the greatest thing because that was always something I thought so much about with baseball. I mean, how did Craig Counsell hit? I don't know. I mean, how did some of these guys, I'm trying to think of it. How did Fernando throw a strike? He always threw his eyeballs up. Nobody would teach that. Yeah. He just did it. It was just him. There's guys that were just who they were. And at some point within their delivery, the mechanics were where they were supposed to be to deliver the pitch.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yep. Amen. You gotta understand what your core principles in a pitching delivery are, and you gotta know what impacts those things, and then you've got to repeat it 1,000 times over again until you get really freaking good at it, And if anything that you're doing is keeping you from being able to repeat it, sticking with something for long enough to see if it actually works is something before you go running back to the old way that you used to do it. And a lot of times, that's the most challenging part, I think. Like this thought, basically, I think is the most challenging part of player development is that everybody going through it, I lived it, everybody going through it, like, wants to get better. Sure. I genuinely wanted to get better. My wife would tell you I'm a perfectionist by nature and a lot of those things. Like I'm toxic at times, like want to do as best as I can,
That's all right with me.
Yeah, and it's very troubling to me sometimes when I can't, when it's out of my control, okay?
Right.
But, that process of coachability, that process of pursuit of excellence, most of those people want to get better, and they would do anything to get better. And you go out and you try these different things. It's such a fine line, I don't think there is a real good right versus wrong. There's a fine line of trying new things, trusting the things work for you, being coachable, having a good filter to say. I had a coach tell me that one time in pro ball about coaching advice. It's not all advice is good advice. There can be some good advice that might be the wrong time for you right now too. And bad advice might be good advice for you at the wrong time too. Wow. How confusing is that?
That is tough.
But it's true.
And here's a coach saying that.
But it's true. It's true. Is that at the end of the day, his point to me though was have a good filter. Yeah. You're the only one that knows the answers to all those questions. If it's too much going on in your head right now for you to comfortably take the ball and go out there and dominate, then leave it for a different day. Wow. And vice versa, be coachable, Yeah. Be coachable. Look for answers, because you're not finding answers without looking for them.
Thank you, Coach, because I do this. This is something I say all the time, and something my dad's taught me, but the body follows the mind.
Yeah. Amen.
And and that's the coach. If your mind is in that place and you can't go out because your body won't, if you're all messed up here, that's the way your body's going to be. Am I right?
No doubt. And you know, your pursuit of finding answers always starts mentally, or your pursuit of development always starts with like a awareness. You know what I mean? Like education. You have to like have goals. You have to have a clear plan and vision, and you have to like those are all things that like mentally have to, and you have to be disciplined and bought in.
That takes shape.
And then and then you go do the activity. You know, so 100% agree. And like that's never going to change. It's never changed. You know, I think what you do between those things, you know, is how the analytics maybe like come into play and how they affect our lives. And, you know.
And maybe, you know, we're looking at then and now, how much more difficult maybe was it without some of this technology that could actually settle the conversation? Like, here, this is the data. This is what it shows. So we need to move in this direction, or this is the data. Oh, we're doing it the wrong way. We need to come back to this, right?
Yeah. You know, I think there's wins and losses to it on both sides, you know, because I think there's things from a feel standpoint we did way better than we do maybe now.
Makes sense.
On a big picture, like bigger scale. But there's obviously things, analytics, development strategies that we do better now that just produces better athletes. Like we were talking about the proof in the pudding on the average velocity, you know, keep going up. You know, but I think, you know, go back to maybe my punchline. Maybe it's the punchline of this entire thing. It's just like gotta be in the middle. You know, like owning the middle, and like being a baseball guy with amazing feel and like pursuing like optimum feel, you know, feeling your delivery.
Right?
Being a ball player. And then also having like data and analytics help support your approach, process, and program. You know, being somewhere in the middle on that, where like I'm a ball player that utilizes these tools. Because look, I mean, these are exceptional tools. Like the motion capture system that we have is like artificial intelligence that puts all these trackers at different points of your body and measures how fast you go down that mound and at what angles you go down that mound. And the capabilities and the amount of data points that thing has to show you exactly how you move through space is like unbelievable, you know, unbelievable. It's so deep that like, you know, you
probably
can't
show
even take
how many
all this.
times my belly jiggles.
It's got a lot of jiggle. It's 300 frames per second of jiggle. Let me
Oh my mercy, that would be
You
bad.
ain't even got to have a
That
big
would be
belly to
ugly.
see jiggle in there. Yeah, but no, I mean it shows you who you are. You know, it shows you who you are. And I think that's probably the thing that people look over quickest is they want to look at what they want to be or what they wish they would be instead of trying to see who they are and who they're supposed to be.
I love that.
You know, so maybe that's a good thing to
I love that. I love that. I agree 100%.
Yeah, know who you are. Find out who you are. Because if you don't know who you are, you never know which way you're going. You know, so that's probably true for a lot of different things in life.
Yes, indeed, my brother.
All right. Well, thank you guys for checking out this episode. Thanks for hanging out with us here. If you guys like this, like, comment, subscribe. Leave us a comment, a question. Happy to answer any of them on future shows, future topics. Appreciate you guys, and we'll see you next time.